as we go through today, what I do want to focus on is my approach for compassion fatigue, understanding what it is and how to deal with it, has been what I used from my journalistic subjects. And those are the 5 W's and H. And maybe before I jump into this talk, what I do want to make clear is this talk has been presented from a practical layman point of view, because we in our church have found a lot of our congregants, our staff, and our pastors had struggled during the COVID-19 period. And so we want to do, as a counseling center, assist them. Michelle, I'm just going to check. Do you want to translate now, or shall I continue?
Okay. Maybe I'll translate first. Jadi yang dilakukan oleh Shaun ini adalah dalam masa krisis ini memang kita mendapatkan kesempatan untuk saling berbagi pengalaman dan pengetahuan yang lebih seperti itu. Yang dialami dari Dr. Shaun adalah di gerejanya pastor serta pemuka-pemuka agama di sana itu mengalami kesulitan, sehingga di sini harus ada sesuatu yang dilakukan untuk mereka seperti itu. Dan mungkin nanti saat pembahasan compassion fatigue ini akan dibahas dalam hal yang mungkin lebih praktikal sehingga kita bisa mengikutinya juga seperti itu.
Thank you, Michelle. So before I continue, I realized maybe you would like to know a little bit about who I am and where I come from. I am married. I have 2 adult children. My son Bradley is 25, and he got married during lockdown, which was a very interesting experience. There was only 10 of us. My daughter Genevieve is 22. My son studied sports psychology, but he's moved over to accounting. And my daughter is studying politics and international relations.
Jadi Shaun ini menikah, lalu memiliki 2 anak. Anak yang pertama itu umur 24 dan anak yang kedua umur 22. Anak laki-lakinya pertamanya belajar melalui sport, psikologi sport, lalu beralih dengan ke akuntansi. Lalu anak yang perempuan itu umur 22 sekarang, dia juga belajar terkait dengan I'm sorry, your daughter learn about?
She's studying politics and international relations, and she's 22.
Politik dan hubungan internasional.
Okay. My wife Trudy is a pastor. We've been pastors for over, well, I'd say 25 years. And we had been pastors in a small town. And then I was an online pastor on the internet. And then we've been pastors together at a mega church of about 3,000 members. So that's our experience.
Jadi istri dari Joynt, istri dari Shaun itu adalah seorang pastor selama 25 tahun. Jadi mereka sudah menjadi pastor itu di sebuah kota yang kecil. Namun sekarang mereka juga jadi member dari mega church, yaitu gereja yang punya 3.000 orang lebih jemaat seperti itu.
And for the academics who are interested in this, I've been in research academia for 20 years. My research interest is the well-being of pastors. So I look at their physical, emotional, spiritual, and social well-being, those 4 areas, and as well as forgiveness research, but across religions.
Jadi untuk yang tertarik pada research, Shaun sendiri sudah melakukan research ini selama 25 tahun, dan topik utama dari research yang dilakukan Shaun adalah terkait dengan kesejahteraan dari pastor. Jadi dia melihat dari ada 4 hal yang menjadi topik kesejahteraan tersebut, dan salah satunya adalah forgiveness atau pengampunan seperti itu.
And then I'm not going to elaborate on this, and Michelle, I hope you're able to translate this. But if you want to know what is my location as a researcher, my ontology is post-positivist, and my epistemology is critical realism.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Repeat that, sir.
Yes. My location as a researcher is my ontology. The reality of being is called a post-positivist. That's where I locate myself. And then also my epistemology, how do I know? I ascribe to critical realism. So that's why I say I'm not sure if you're going to have those words.
Jadi fokus pada research-nya itu ada di ontologi dan post participes dan mungkin itu bidangnya Shaun ya, bidangnya Shaun untuk di sananya itu mempelajari terkhusus terkait dengan hal tersebut.
Critical study also.
Yeah, critical studies.
Critical realism, yeah.
Oh, critical
realism.
Yeah, let's jump into the topic at hand today. So, as I said before, I'm approaching this from a journalist point of view, which normally would ask questions as you see on the screen. What is it? When does it occur? Who does it affect? Where does it take place? Why does it happen? And how do we deal with it?
Jadi Shaun hari ini akan melihat dari sudut pandang jurnalistik, yaitu terkait dengan 5W1H yang kita tahu, yaitu apa itu, kapan itu terjadi, siapa yang akan terdampak dari hal itu, di mana itu terjadi, kenapa itu terjadi, dan bagaimana kita dapat menghandle hal tersebut.
Okay, so firstly, what is compassion fatigue? And before I go into these definitions, what we do need to realize is compassion fatigue has been around for a while, since 1992. So it is not brand new on the horizon of research. But what is happening is where it was originally just for nurses and within the medical field, it's expanding into other fields.
Jadi sebenarnya yang hari ini kita bahas terkait compassion fatigue itu bukan sesuatu yang baru. Hal ini sudah ditemukan dari tahun 1992, namun pada saat itu dikhususkan pada perawat atau tenaga medis.
So some researchers have positioned compassion fatigue as a subsection of burnout.
Jadi beberapa peneliti melakukan subseksi pada compassion fatigue ini termasuk dalam burnout.
Yeah. And while burnout could take longer to develop and also longer to recover from, compassion fatigue usually happens quicker but can also be recovered quicker.
Jadi kalau burnout itu biasanya terjadi dalam jangka waktu yang lebih panjang dan biasanya akan lebih sulit untuk disembuhkan, namun compassion fatigue ini akan berlangsung pada periode yang lebih sebentar, tapi juga lebih mudah untuk dipulihkan.
So two aspects of what it is, and the first one is, as I've listed there, it's an apathy or indifference towards the suffering of others as a result of overexposure to tragic news and stories, images, and the subsequent appeals for assistance.
Jadi poin pertama adalah adanya sikap apatis atau ketidakpedulian terhadap penderitaan orang lain atau sebagai akibat dari paparan yang berlebih terkait dengan berita atau gambaran tragis dan kebutuhan akan bantuan yang mengikuti hal tersebut.
So if one thinks of today, when I opened my phone this morning, I immediately looked at the news headlines and I could see news from across the world instantly, from earthquakes to hurricanes to starvation to floods, and I was overwhelmed by the amount of news that I received on my phone.
Jadi saat pagi ini Dr. Shaun membuka berita, dia dapat secara langsung menghadapi berita-berita yang bisa membaca, bisa melihat berita-berita terkait dengan gempa bumi, terkait dengan banjir, dan berbagai macam penderitaan yang lainnya, dan itu kadang-kadang membuat dia merasa overwhelmed atau sangat terbebani dengan hal tersebut.
And it wasn't like that many years ago. Many years ago, you lived in a small village and everyone knew everyone's business but it was a small village, 200, 300, 400 people. And if you got news from around the world, it would be because of a traveling soldier, troops coming through, maybe in the Roman times, or it could be a musician who's traveling through and he's going to tell you some of the news that's happened across the world. So you were exposed to less traumatic events.
Jadi hal ini sangat berbeda sekali dengan beberapa tahun yang lalu, di mana teknologi mungkin tidak terlalu canggih, di mana kita hanya terekspos dengan sangat sedikit hal-hal yang membuat kita trauma, karena mungkin perputaran informasinya itu lebih sedikit.
So that would be more aligned to secondary trauma exposure.
Jadi hal ini dikenal juga sebagai stres traumatis sekunder.
However, compassion fatigue, if we look at the second definition, is the profound emotional and physical erosion that takes place when helpers are unable to refuel and regenerate.
Jadi terjadi pengikisan secara emosional dan fisik yang mendalam yang terjadi ketika seorang penolong atau helper itu tidak bisa mengisi dirinya sendiri dan tidak bisa beregenerasi.
So there are two aspects. There's erosion, a giving out, and then there's the not filling up, unable to refuel.
Jadi ada dua aspek, yaitu pengikisan, atau yang kedua adalah tidak bisa untuk mengisi kembali atau refuel, mengisi diri sendiri.
And so I want to use the illustration of a bucket that has a tap going on the top and a tap at the bottom. And you need to fill the bucket with water on the top. And then as you are busy watering the garden or filling up your swimming pool, the water is going out at the bottom.
Jadi ada ilustrasi bahwa saat kita punya ember, kita diisi dari atas, kita akan diisi dengan air, sehingga saat kita buka ember tersebut dari bawah, kita bisa menyirami tanaman di taman.
So the emotional physical erosion takes place when more water is going out than water coming in.
Jadi emosional erosi atau pengikisan emosional tersebut terjadi saat air yang keluar dari ember tersebut lebih banyak daripada air yang masuk dalam ember.
And also to add to the illustration is we can either fill the bucket with water or with polluted water, dirty water. So it's both quantity and quality that's important.
Jadi ada dua hal yang penting, yaitu kuantitas dan kualitasnya. Kita bisa terkait dengan banyak sedikitnya air yang dimasukkan ke ember, atau terkait dengan bersih atau tidaknya air yang dimasukkan ke ember tersebut.
So to continue with the word compassion, it's made up of two words, com and passion. Com in its original means with. Passion means suffering, the original Latin. So we're talking about coming alongside someone in their suffering. That's what compassion is.
Jadi ada compassion tersebut dari kata dua, yaitu com atau datang, lalu passion yaitu penderitaan. Jadi bagaimana seorang itu datang dengan penderitaannya tersebut.
So compassion fatigue is when you're coming along someone who is suffering, but you're getting tired of it because it's draining and you are not refueling.
Jadi compassion fatigue itu adalah saat kita bersama dengan orang yang mengalami penderitaan tersebut, tapi kita tidak berhasil untuk melakukan refuel yang tadi itu, mengisi diri sendiri, sehingga kita mengalami kelelahan.
So what compassion fatigue isn't is burnout. Burnout is exhaustion of physical, emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration.
Jadi compassion fatigue ini bukanlah burnout. Kalau burnout itu lebih pada kelelahan atau kejenuhan terkait dengan kekuatan atau motivasi secara fisik dan emosional, biasanya akibat stres atau frustasi yang berkepanjangan.
And maybe at this stage it's important to say that I'm speaking to you today as a participant observer because I've lived through the things I'm busy talking to you about.
Sorry, can you repeat that, sir?
I'm speaking today as a participant, observer, someone who's both experienced and looked at these things.
Oke, jadi saat ini Shaun itu berdiri di sini sebagai partisipan juga, sebagai orang yang pernah juga mengalami hal tersebut.
So I was diagnosed with depression about 3 years ago, and it was a result of burnout in a work situation that it escalated.
Jadi Shaun ini sempat mengalami depresi 3 tahun yang lalu, itu akibat burnout terkait dengan beban kerja yang sangat tinggi.
And so it's been a 2-year journey for me to come to terms with what happened to me through burnout and the depression and the medication I'm on. And sometimes it's difficult to talk to others about this because of the stigma that will they think differently of me when they know I'm on medication.
Jadi 3 tahun ini sudah menjadi suatu perjalanan yang cukup berat, karena dengan pengobatannya, dengan mungkin treatment yang dilakukan, ada kesulitan juga untuk mengatakan hal tersebut kepada orang lain karena ada stigma-stigma atau cap yang diberikan oleh lingkungan terkait dengan orang yang ada dalam pengobatan depresi.
So let's carry on with what burnout is. It's the physical and emotional exhaustion that workers can experience when they have low job satisfaction and feel powerless and overwhelmed at work. However, burnout does not necessarily mean that our view of the world has been damaged or that we've lost the ability to feel compassion for others.
Jadi burnout itu juga merupakan kelelahan fisik dan emosional yang dapat dialami oleh pekerja ketika mereka memiliki kepuasan kerja yang rendah, merasa tidak berdaya, dan kewalahan di tempat kerja. Namun kelelahan ini tidak selalu berarti bahwa pandangan tentang dunia ini telah rusak, tapi juga atau bahwa kita telah kehilangan kemampuan untuk memiliki compassion atau kasih kepada orang lain.
So burnout has got 3 components. The first one is lack of personal accomplishment. The second one is depersonalization. And the third one is emotional exhaustion.
Jadi burnout itu memiliki 3 hal, yaitu lack of personal
accomplishment.
Accomplishment, ya.
Personal accomplishment.
Ada kurangnya pencapaian personal, lalu depersonalisasi, dan kelelahan emosional.
And so in my situation, it wasn't lack of personal accomplishment because I felt fulfilled at work. It wasn't depersonalization. It was extreme emotional exhaustion.
Jadi di kasus Shaun ini bukan yang pertama, bukan ketidakmampuannya dia, bukan depersonalisasi juga, namun merupakan yang ketiga, yaitu kelelahan secara emosional yang teramat sangat.
I had a very difficult situation at work with a staff member, and at that stage, my superiors were not assisting me with the situation, and that added to this extreme tension inside that ended up in a severe burnout situation.
Jadi Shaun saat itu memiliki problem dengan koleganya, dengan staff member di sana, dan seniornya juga tidak membantu dengan kondisi tersebut, sehingga dia mengalami tekanan yang teramat sangat dari pekerjaannya.
Okay, so we know compassion fatigue isn't burnout.
Jadi saat ini kita tahu bahwa compassion fatigue itu bukanlah burnout.
It is also not vicarious traumatization. So vicarious traumatization is the indirect trauma that can occur when we are exposed to difficult or disturbing images and stories secondhand.
Compassion fatigue ini juga bukanlah trauma yang diwakilkan atau vicarious traumatization, tapi merupakan trauma yang mana itu merupakan trauma tidak langsung yang dapat terjadi ketika kita dihadapkan pada gambar atau cerita yang sulit atau menggelisahkan atau mengganggu kita.
And that's what I was referring to in the beginning when I spoke about the news stories on my phone.
Itu adalah hal yang digambarkan oleh Shaun saat dia mengatakan terkait dengan berita yang dia dapatkan dari HP-nya.
Secondly, it's the profound shift in worldview that can occur in helping professionals when they work with clients who've experienced trauma. Help us notice that their fundamental beliefs about the world are being altered and possibly damaged by being repeatedly exposed to traumatic material.
Terdapat perubahan besar dari cara pandang yang terjadi oleh orang-orang profesional yang bertugas membantu ini, karena mereka selalu berhubungan dengan klien-klien yang mengalami trauma. Dan profesional ini akan menyadari bahwa keyakinan mendasar mereka terkait dengan dunia ini berubah atau mungkin rusak, karena berulang kali terpapar hal-hal yang traumatis.
So maybe I must take a moment to explain what a worldview is. A worldview is how you perceive the world. We all have worldviews, and they are influenced by our upbringing, they are influenced by our environment, and they're influenced by our religion or faith.
Jadi, Shaun menjelaskan tadi terkait dengan worldview. Worldview itu adalah cara pandang kita mengenai dunia ini seperti apa. Jadi, hal ini dipengaruhi oleh 3 hal, yaitu upbringing atau bagaimana kita membawakan diri. Yang kedua adalah environment atau lingkungan kita. Yang ketiga adalah the third one is
it was environment, the way you're brought up, and then your faith or religion influence.
Religion, okay. Dan agama yang diyakini oleh kita.
So, us as human beings are generally spiritual. I say generally because some don't think they are, but in essence we are. And when we talk about a worldview, change in vicarious traumatization, it could be that you believe that God cares for people and he wants to help them. But continuously being exposed to suffering of others, eventually you can think, maybe God isn't caring. Maybe he doesn't want to help.
Jadi terkait dengan sesi religiusitas ini, semua orang itu memiliki religiusitasnya, tapi kembali lagi mungkin ada beberapa orang yang merasa mereka tidak religius, tapi yang dimaksudkan di sini adalah lebih pada awalnya orang itu akan percaya bahwa Tuhan itu peduli pada orang-orang dan mau membantu. Namun saat terus-menerus dipaparkan dengan trauma-trauma yang terjadi, pada satu titik orang akan merasa bahwa mungkin Tuhan itu tidak mau membantu atau mungkin Tuhan itu tidak peduli.
So yeah, I've got a table with the 3 compared to one another. And if you look carefully, you'll see the first column has burnout, the second column compassion fatigue, and the third column vicarious traumatization. And what I've tried to do is group them with colors. So where they have the similar colors, as in purple, you would know they overlap. Where it's in black, that is more unique to each of those sections.
Sedangkan di warna hitam itu menunjukkan bahwa itu adalah keunikan dari masing-masing bagian.
Notice the one that is in a brown-red color, because it's often the same as in vicarious traumatization, a change in beliefs, expectations, or assumptions. So I'm not going to go through all of these because there are too many to talk about, but I want to highlight a few. So compassion fatigue has the elements of sadness and grief. And if we go down, you'll see the next purple says somatic or physical complaints. So in my experience of compassion fatigue, I had gone through these various elements where there was sadness and grief. There was an avoidance or dread of working with some people. There was some somatic or physical complaints. Although I would say compassion fatigue was very secondary or third, and very mild for me. I was suffering more from burnout. It was more in our staff and members that I noticed some of the compassion fatigue taking place. For example, there was an increase in sick days being logged. So these are the signs. Let's go to the symptoms. Notice that all three have physical symptoms, psychological distress symptoms, there are cognitive shifts, the way we think, and there are relational disturbances. What compassion fatigue has in addition are those remaining five: headaches, digestive problems, muscle tension, fatigue, poor concentration, focus, and judgment. So some of our staff had mentioned that they had digestive problems. Others had started getting migraines, and they were going to the doctor to be booked off, and I started asking the question, what is going on here? And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there had been an increase in challenges the pastors were facing, because members were coming to them saying, I've lost my job, my spouse wants a divorce, or this has happened, I don't have food. And this was creating some challenges, the volume or the amount of people coming to the pastors. Okay, so we then move on to the triggers. Okay, so again, we have the first three that are very similar for all: burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious traumatization. Personal characteristics taking place in all three. In other words, the type of person you are can influence this in your life. For example, people with perfectionist tendencies would be more likely to be affected by this. So then also work-related attributes, things happening at work, the work environment. So notice in compassion fatigue, the one that is highlighted in the brown-red color, prolonged exposure to trauma material of clients. As I referred to earlier, imagine you're a pastor on staff and either a staff member or a congregant comes. In your case, you are a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, and you are exposed over and over to the trauma material of your clients. Going back to our bucket, so what's happening is water is going at the bottom. You are caring for them, but we are concerned that no water is coming in at the top or too little to compensate.
Jadi kita lihat lagi pada
So let's look at the emotional symptoms. So firstly, there's a feeling of being overwhelmed or hopeless or helpless or powerless when you hear of others suffering. I recall one day my wife wanting to tell me a story of someone going through a difficult situation, and I said to her, I can't hear this. I can't cope with hearing more bad news during the COVID-19 period. Another symptom is feeling anger or irritability or sadness or anxiety. And then feeling detached from your surroundings or from your physical or emotional experiences. Okay. Another symptom, feeling emotionally, psychologically, or physically exhausted, burnt out or numbness. Another symptom, emotional symptom, reduced empathy, feeling for others, and a limited tolerance for stress. What I'm not going to do is spend too much time on all the symptoms, because my aim is to give you the coping or care, self-care tools to help you in this process. As I said, this talk is really a practical approach and not an academic paper. Let's look at the cognitive symptoms. So the first one we have is a constant thinking or dwelling around the suffering of the trauma of survivors. We could say that's rumination, thinking over and over about the suffering of the trauma of survivors. It's important to note the word constant, because that is what goes through here often. Constant self-blame or thoughts of I should or could have done more. I had to work through this personally a few years ago when one of my clients committed suicide, and I had to self-evaluate had I done enough or not? And so I had gone through some of these processes.